Let it go, baby.
Unsyndicated presents What the Puck with Sean Baligian.
Hi, hope you all had a wonderful, wonderful Christmas. He's Mike Iavasile. I'm Sean Baligian. This is What the Puck. This is a holiday for many, many hockey fans out there. The holiday starts in about 5 minutes, as well as Slovakia and Sweden get things kicked off. Mike, how are you? I trust you had a great, great holiday.
Wonderful. And as the kids get older, as you know, it gets a little bit easier. So how about you guys?
Same thing. I don't miss the days of being awakened at 6:30, 7 o'clock. It was like mosey on downstairs at about 10:30, 11 o'clock. That sounds good because Dad had too much to drink Christmas Eve.
Oh, did you?
Dad had way too much to drink Christmas Eve.
In between all that cooking, you had some time to drink?
Well, you know what it was? Once the cooking got done, it was about an hour before everybody came over. I started putting them down, and then I just kept putting them down, and I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. And then he had, my son had a bunch of his friends show up at about, I don't know, like 11, 12. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm 20 something again. And we had a few. So it was a good day. How about you, man?
Same thing. Yeah, a lot of family came over. I didn't put them back as heavily as you did. And I also didn't have as much cooking to do as you did. So I kind of took it easy knowing that, it's the marathon, not the sprint that I've got to survive in these 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, and the best thing is we got the World Juniors starting. We're going to get to that in just a couple seconds, but want to start with the Wings. And I'm not joking when I say this. I can't believe Coach Lalonde has a job right now. I can't. And I'm not just talking about, the all-encompassing thing, but just what you saw. And even he said it, the last 2.5 games were downright frightening. They really were. I think if you look at the last period and a half, maybe of the game in Detroit against Montreal, the game in Montreal was gross. Yep. The loss to the Blues was gross. I mean, he basically said as much. Mike, are we in a time period where I think if you're going to make the move, if they crap the bed against the Leafs tomorrow at LCA, this might be the time to do it. And if it isn't the time to do it, we might just see him here till the end of the year.
Yeah, and that's a very good question that, speaking of the holidays and dinner and everything, it was the most talked about topic in any of the gatherings that I've been to. What are they doing with the line? What are they going to do? So you look at the Toronto game, but Sean, let's just look past this Toronto game. If he survives this Toronto game, you got Washington and Pittsburgh right after that too. So it's not only just a tough day coming up tomorrow, but it could be a tough stretch all the way into next Tuesday. But you bring up a good point. What does it mean if he survives this, let's say, 3-game stretch, which looks like it's going to be bad? However, I'll make a point to that. And how good do you see this as a good sign that not only is Lalonde talking about it, but Larkin, as the captain, called out not only himself, but the entire team, saying, read that we've got to show up. We don't have enough guys showing up night after night.
I think that's part of it. And, that's the interesting question. He said, Tom said, good morning, guys. Hope you had a good holiday. You too, buddy. Dave said, it's got to be a nail in the coffin. Mike, here's the question that you don't know this as you were talking. I was putting up the thing. I said, World Juniors Day. And I said, a lot of blame to go around with the Wings. How much of it is on Lalonde? And I want to be crystal clear. He has to own his fair share. Okay.
Yep.
These guys aren't going for him. Period. You watch the game. I don't have to take a deep dive into that. You guys are watching it, okay? I think even some of his comments after the game in Montreal and after the game against St. Louis kind of suggested as such, all right? But these problems exist. So it exists with, and I have to give my pal credit because he said a couple years ago, I don't like the way this team is constructed. You really did. I mean, to give you full marks on that. It's the way the team is constructed. It's some of the contracts. We'll get into some of that. And to me, this is on the players as well to, instead of hang the head and let the message not go through, you have to control what you have to control, and you have to go out there and work your tail off. And all of those things are askew right now. Every one of them are askew right now.
Yeah, you can't deny the fact of what Lalone, control what you can control. And Lalone, his hardest job right now is getting these men to show up every night and put forth that effort. And this isn't just a December thing. You look at the up and down. This is who this team has been. And Sean, the one thing I have written down here, it just says deja vu. This is very similar. This is right about the time me and you jumped into What the Puck last year, right? It was right around the January, February kind of time. And this is exactly what we were talking about. I mean, identical. And it was, when's Lalone going to go? When's Lalone? And we would see these stretches like we just saw with the Montreal and the St. Louis game. But then we would see that last game against Toronto, and we see the effort. And you can see that it's there, that they're playing. I still, Sean, just like you said earlier in your statement, I say this is what is constructed. And on top of the contracts, I know that you want to talk about, we have to finally have to sit down and people have to start pointing the finger at Yzerman. And I'm going to sit on the fence here when we get to that conversation, because I've got an interesting situation and I want to get your thoughts and everyone else's thoughts as kind of where actually this team and this franchise is.
Well, and here's the thing, Mike. 2 years ago, and I'm giving you full marks for this. I was still all in on this, and at the time, you had these pieces, and I think you had Lucas Raymond where he was at. You had Mo Seider where he was at, and you and I have talked about this for a few months now. You haven't seen these guys take a big next step, okay? And I think a lot of times what we're all guilty of is sitting back and assuming that there's going to be a big next step because we've seen it with so many people. Well, what if this is it? Seriously, what if this is it? And again, I want to stress this very, very plainly, okay? You take Lucas Raymond, I would. You take Mo Seider, I would. But you know what it reminds me of, Mike? It reminds me of the Larkin conversation. It does. And listen, it's the same. I want Dylan Larkin on my team. I do. Okay. But I think if you're expecting him to be something more than he isn't, you are going to be let down. And I think that has been the problem with this franchise, not only during the Holland regime, but so far in the Steve Yzerman regime. You're asking guys to be something that they aren't. And I think that is a lot of what troubles the Detroit Red Wings right now.
And when you ask these guys to do more, you're going to see it in.
All right, Mike cut out for just a minute. Let's see if we can get Mike back. Yeah, it happens. No worry about that. And so that's where I'm at right now. And I'll listen. I'll answer the question myself. I'll answer the question myself. Hi, Mike. I'll answer the question. How much of the Wings' troubles are on Lalonde? It's there. But you can't let bad contracts off the hook. You can't let I don't want to say lack of development, but guys not being as good and as developed as we all thought they should off the hook. You can't let, and let's be honest now, okay? I don't hear people saying this, Mike, but I'll be the first to say it. Steve Yzerman had a miserable offseason. Miserable with a capital M. It was a miserable offseason, and there's no other way to say that at this juncture.
Absolutely not. And it just seems everywhere you turn, there's actually an article on Jake Wallman. I mean, that's the big one that everyone's talking about. The bringing in of the aged goalies, the aged players with these longer contracts. You sent me the 4 contracts that we're sitting here looking at, like that. It's just like stuck in the mud right there in the middle of this cap. But that's what I think, like right at the top of my page. I think this is on Yzerman. Am I saying this is a total disaster and he has to go? No, and that'll get to my next point. But this is the way this roster has been constructed. This is who this roster is. And what the next part has to be, there's got to be top end talent coming in here to complement what we have. And then I think these players, a Larkin, a Raymond, and Sider, are going to flourish into what people think they are.
Yeah. And you, Mike, honestly, I don't know where you want to start. Do you want to start with some of the contracts?
Sure.
This is what jumps out to me. Tom said, would have been nice. The goalie would have stolen the game Friday night. Yeah. Where do you want to start? How about $5.625 million being paid to Cop until 27-28?
That's
what do you want me to say? Like, honestly, what do you, and again, Mike, I'm not saying he's a bad player. Okay.
right.
He's a role player. JT Comfer, 5.1 until 28-29.
There are two in the same players too. That if this was the problem with these are, if this was a complete roster, we wouldn't be having this conversation because these guys would be filling that gap on that third line.
Yep.
That's exactly where they belong, and it would be one of the best third lines trickling into a fourth line in the NHL is what we'd be talking. But these guys have to be more because the top guys aren't enough because we don't have anything on the top end. Which you when you sent me those contracts, let's not skip over that Alex DeBrincat contract,
it's coming. Alex DeBrincat, and I've known this kid for a while. I'm a fan. Okay, 13 goals, 12 assists, 25 points in 34 games, $7.875 million until 27-28. And here's the problem with that, Mike. Those numbers are even skewed because they come in bunches. They really do. With him, they come in when you disappear for a while, and he does. He has these periods of disappearing, and then boom, I'm going to pop a couple of points or anything. The numbers can look skewed. One more, and you and I both shook our head at this one, but it needs to be mentioned. $4.75 million for Tarasenko for one more year.
I mean, we've had this show before. This is when we're going over these, it is what I wrote on the top. It's deja vu to what we've been talking about since we started this show, and then over the summer when we came back in talking about who Tarasenko is and why we liked him on Florida. Because I'm sure you can find a show back in the during the playoffs that we were praising Florida for getting him.
Yes.
Two totally different rosters.
One thing, and you know what, Mike, I vividly remember. Do you know what I said? That's a great signing for them. You know why?
Yep.
He's a big body on the depth, and you're not asking him to be that player that he isn't anymore, the man like he was in St. Louis. That's why I love that. And you can't have that here in Detroit.
No. And correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know why my memory's saying this. I've got all these devices open. I could probably check it. But he came from Florida to Florida from Ottawa, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ottawa made the same mistake as Detroit made. You've got to be able to look back at that. And it didn't work in Ottawa for the same reason it's not working in Detroit. You're looking at him being something else. And then these contracts those contracts right in the middle are getting in the way of things. When we were going over these contracts and talking, I've got to say, not so bad on the defensive end because they're all gone within a year or two. I mean, after next season, everything could possibly be gone. But what's next? Where are we in the Yzerman plan, and what is next in your mind, Sean?
What's interesting about this, and I've heard a lot of people say this. Tom said, "Is Yzerman's hands tied with really spending money?" All I can do is go to, and I urge people to do this. I go to Sport Track. They keep a pretty good accounting of what's going on in the National Hockey League. The Wings have $2.3 million of cap space right now, so they're spending pretty close to the threshold. What should be shocking to everybody, Mike, what should be shocking to everybody right now is the average age of this team right now. The average age of this team is 28.2. That should be shocking to everybody right now. You know, for all the youth movements coming and doing it the right way and taking the long way to get there and developing guys and growing guys and all of that stuff, right? This is a team that has an average age of 28.2 right now. I mean, it's not a good situation to be in, Mike, across the board.
No, and that gets to that question again, where are we in this? And if we could get inside the room and find out what this plan is, because the way he's constructed it, you can't construct a winning roster within a salary cap era the way he's done it. You can't sign guys. You can't sign these aged guys. You have to have the core of this team not be 28, but be closer to 24, 25 years old, 23 years old, and your homegrown talent that you've brought in. And that's what should be littering your roster. That's the only way you have success when you have a salary cap. You have to have your guys come in and do it. You can't sign overpriced guys.
Mike, breaking news right now. The Detroit Red Wings have fired coach Derek Lalonde and brought back a guy that was once a neighbor of mine, Todd McClellan. Todd McClellan. Yep. Steve Yzerman today announced the team has named Todd McClellan the 29th head coach in franchise history and signed him to a multi-year contract. Additionally, the Red Wings have hired Trent Yawney as an assistant coach. Head coach Derek Lalonde and associate coach Bob Bugner have been relieved of their coaching duties effective immediately. And yes, I miss the Whalers as well, more than you could ever know. So that was really, I do miss the Whalers very much. So yes, he was an assistant here for years before he got his opportunity. As I mentioned, we were neighbors out here, and he is the new head coach of the Detroit Red Wings.
Well, I think that kind of answers possibly the question. If you look at Steve Yzerman's history, and if our trajectory is the same as his Tampa trajectory, he just found his John Cooper to his Guy Boucher. A long-term contract. He's bringing this guy in. Now, Red Wing fan, you have your coach for the oncoming future. What do you think?
Now, again, this goes back to something that I have said forever. This is his first retread as a coach. But you have to remember there is familiarity there with Coach McClellan as well. Yep. There is he played for him, if I'm not mistaken. You can fact check me here. I think Steve's last year was McClellan's first year on the bench in Detroit. You can fact check me there. I think that was it, or maybe they missed by a little bit, if I'm not mistaken. Like, you know what? I wish I could fact check myself there, but Steve's last year was 05-06. And I can't remember if McClellan came on in 05-06 or if he came on in 06-07. So if you want to fact check me, you can go right ahead. But this is a guy that there's familiarity here. He, like I said, he lived out near me. He's been able to cut his teeth. Mixed results as a head coach. I think he would be the first guy to say it. But at the end of the day, and you know what? I know he coached my buddy Boof, by the way. I know he coached Boof down in Houston. Mike, I'm going to say it again. We said it at the beginning of the show. We said a move had to be made. It really did. I think Coach Lalonde knew it had to be made. He looked like a completely defeated man to me. When he talked about fragile the other day, that jumped out to me. Alan said Stevie Y fired the coach. Yeah, we're talking about it right now. So when he talked about how fragile things were, to me that was kind of dead man walking type of stuff, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I mean, sometimes you get up there and you're speaking in front of everybody and a press, and you're actually speaking about yourself. And that's exactly how his words came off, and like you said, how he looked. Defeated. And what timing? I mean, it's like we had this plan to be on at noon right when this was going to happen, And I was sitting there thinking, I know the World Juniors is coming, but I don't know if we get past this. And now with this news, I'm kind of real, because I was thinking, I mean, I don't know about you, Sean. When I was thinking what they were going to do was that they were just going to put Bugner in for the rest of the year as the interim coach and just kind of take it as it is, seeing where this year is going. But they're stepped up. And do you think this is going to lead to some moves on the roster?
What though? Like, seriously, you know what? When I keep, it's funny. One of the things that I keep hearing people say is, we have to start peeling away things and see what we can get for them. Okay, well, how much value do you have? Like, legitimately, how much value do you have? And how much are you going to strip away? And I say this all the time: to get something, you have to give up something. You know, I mean, it just doesn't work the way that I think people make it out to work. And Mike, there aren't a lot of like really desirable pieces here that are going to do that.
Now, again, we get back to the way you have to build this. What they have has got to start coming up, and they've got to start giving some guys chances. A couple of these guys, as we get closer to the trade deadline, might have some value somewhere. I mean, they're going to have to retain salary on some of them, but every good Cup runs needs a third liner, a penalty killer, a guy that's going to grind stuff out for you on a roster that's already made the playoffs. But you're right. And I mean, and you're talking about Buffalo's getting ready to chop it down. The Rangers are sending out a lot of names. Comparatively, we don't have much to go there. So you're not, when I say roster change, I'm not saying about bringing stuff in, but what's going to go and how's it going to go.
Yep. That's exactly it. So let me try to get, we're going to react with you guys. Tom, thanks for fact checking me. McClellan was on the bench in Yzerman's last year. Yeah. So he came on 05-06. I know I had him on ice time a couple times. And then he left shortly after they won the Stanley Cup. I know it was like mere days after they won the Stanley Cup in 2008. He got hired in San Jose. So obviously we're reacting with you. This is in real time. It's funny because I've already heard from some people, Mike, that look, if you think that Coach Lalonde was all that ails this team, you're not paying attention. I'm sorry, you're not. I hope that Coach McClellan finds a spark that they haven't had for a while now. But Dave said, I guess the nail was in the coffin. Damn, Yzerman going to talk soon with Coach. Yeah, it was something had to happen. I told you guys, I was watching that game Saturday night. The game in Montreal was miserable. Like there was nothing. It was miserable. And Mike, I was watching the Habs broadcast, and they were like laughing. That he looked like a man that was grasping at straws, the way he was juggling the lines and trying to mix and match, doing anything he could to find a spark out of these guys. And this was bound to happen. It was. And that's why if you go back and you watch the beginning of the show, it's like, I can't believe he still has a job. Maybe it's tomorrow. Well, Steve was nice and waited till after Christmas. Although something tells me, Mike, that he probably knew this was coming anyway, but just waited until after Christmas.
There's conversations that go on. And I think, again, if you go back to those last press conferences that he had, that's a lot of what you were seeing on his face that was on his mind. He knew it was going to happen. Is it going to happen now, or are they going to let me enjoy my holidays? And then we'll have it done as soon as we get back. But if we can, Sean, can we step back in Steve Yzerman's history here? And I'm going to ask you, because I've asked this a couple times now, where are we on the Yzerman plan? And we're going to compare it to the Tampa Bay Lightning edition. With the bringing in of Coach McClellan here, let's get to right where John Cooper came in, right? Mm-hmm. And that was right before the 2013 season. Right before that season, that Tampa Bay Lightning team, after their Eastern Conference run in 2010, missed the playoffs for 2 years. They had a ragged, tired roster. Now, I know In 2013 and 2012, while they were missing the playoffs, Sean, they brought in some names and drafted some names. I want to see if you recognize any of these. Nikita Kucherov.
He's familiar.
Andrei Vasilevsky.
He's all right.
Braden Point.
Mm-hmm.
Andre Palat.
Yeah.
Anthony Cirilli.
Yeah.
Cal Foote.
Yeah.
Then they went to some undrafted guys. Tyler Johnson. Yanni Gord.
He had some success.
Yeah. Then the trades that he brought in. Ryan McDonough. This one you might want to plug your ears. Mikhail Sergachev. Eric Cernak. Right? Hitting home runs, obviously, on all of those. With a new coach. Those are the draft picks. Over the next 7 years, they build this team. They have, in 2018 and 2019, 2 disappointing losses to the Capitals and the Blue Jackets in the playoffs before winning the Cup in 2020. Do you think that is in any way a correlation to what we're seeing in Detroit now, where Tampa was in 2013? Okay, so where do you think you are in that? As far because that and the reason I'm asking is that right there, Sean, is 7 years away from winning the Cup.
You got it. And remember, don't forget they went to that one Cup and they lost with Ben Bishop, if as you recall. So when you talk about all the names out there, okay, so let's try to. We all know that. Well, I've been telling you Trey Augustine's a goaltender of the future for this team.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm telling you right now, that's the way it is. No disrespect to Sebastian, but he's the goaltender of the team. So what do you have that compares in any way, shape, or form to some of those players that you just mentioned? You like Edvinsson, you like Mo Seider, you like Lucas Raymond. Who else do you want to put on this list? And don't tell me about the guys that are starting to make noise for themselves at a different level. Like, who else do you legitimately put on that list at this point in time? And I'm not being funny.
No, you're not. I mean, you hit it. You hit it right there. And the reason I find this interesting is because we can use some of these guys that are overseas. Some of these guys that we're going to watch later this afternoon on Team Sweden and USA, because that's right where they were 7 years before they ended up winning, which isn't guaranteed to win that Cup. So right now, no, we don't have these names, but let's also remember these guys weren't these big names when they first came in. And as I was reading this, I'm like, okay, I can see it. I as you know, me and you have these conversations. I'm very critical of where Yzerman's taking this team and what has to happen. But I also got to put this out there, Sean. People that think this Yzerman plan, this is the year in these next couple of years, remember 5 years. This plan, if on pace with what he did in Tampa, is 7 years away. Because you're talking Augustine is at least 4 years away from being ready. That's if he comes out this year. All these other names, Danielson and these guys that are down, Casper hasn't started to do anything, right? 7 years down the line, now your Lucas Raymond, your Seiders, Larkin could be way gone by then. I mean, 7 years down the road, these guys are all veterans. He's got to bring in a whole new draft class over the next couple of years. Are people ready for 7 years?
Here are some comments. 40 Gumbel said, we are in the initial evaluation of the young talent phase. Unfortunately, what happened with the Wings has probably ratcheted up the heat on Yzerman, but the NHL is a different beast. And 40 Gumbel, I guess my response to that would be, I agree, but, and what I mean by I agree, but is I think, Lord knows I've said this for many, many years in this town. I think we're very guilty of kind of overrating our own. And when you talk about the development of guys, how much better has Lucas Raymond gotten in 2 years? I'm not being funny. I'm asking a serious question.
No.
How much?
And
the one that jumps out to me, though, is Mo Seider. Because, Mike, I hope I'm not being too hard, but I'm going to. Mo Seider is the same guy I was excited about 2 years ago.
Yes.
And it's not bad. It's not bad. It's not bad. But it's not trending to the this dude's going to win a Norris Trophy one day type of thing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And that, to me, is a huge indictment on this whole plan and where we're going with it. Because You can't just put these two guys out, because if you go back, I mean, Tampa Bay was done with Stamkos in the beginning before this all took off and roster pieces started to come in, and then Stamkos was who he was. So as Austin says here, they started off with a Hall of Fame player in Stamkos. He wasn't a Hall of Fame player in the beginning of his career. He came on, he started playing. Then they bring pieces in, and he could be who he is. You put Stamkos in the beginning of his career in the same position that Lucas Raymond's in, I think we're looking at a lot of the same things.
How many times did I say this to you, Mike, that the one thing that Steve Yzerman didn't have when he took over here that he did have in Tampa is a not ready for primetime Hedman and a not ready for primetime Stamkos. They didn't exist. They weren't here.
And then they built it.
Yeah.
Then they built it, and those guys became legends because of Kucherov, Vasilevsky, Point, Palat, Cirelli, Foote. I mean, that is what it takes. So that means your head, look at, and people have said it hasn't come there. Your Hedman is your Sider, your Stamkos is your Raymond. I'm not saying these guys are going to be in the Hall of Fame. I'm not going to say they're going to be the greatest things ever, but that's what he's looking at as those two pieces, right? And then Augustine's going to be his Vasilevsky. But guys, they aren't going to do anything if everyone else isn't. Kucherov, Point, Palat. Look, Kucherov's the best player in the NHL right now. I mean, that's what we're talking. He has to get. Is that Danielson? Who is that? That's. I mean, if you think Raymond and Sider are that, who are the other guys like this group that came in over that 7 years and got them to that point? But again, people, put your boots on, because we have a lot of walking over 7 years to handle this team, and especially there's going to be some hard times.
Lots of reaction. Maybe I'll do an ad read, as Todd is begging me to do. Maybe I'll do one like right now because I'm so overdue. Lindsay Broadwell, when it comes time to getting yourself a house, whether you're buying, selling, or both, you need to contact the right agent. Who do we recommend? Lindsay Broadwell. Your house is probably the biggest investment you'll ever make, and that's why you need a pro. Lindsay grew up on the mean streets of Northville and has expanded her team all over Southeast Michigan. She's an expert in all facets of the business. When it's time to move, our friend Lindsay and her team will make sure you get the most out of your house and everything goes smoothly when finding your new home. Buyer, seller, even first-time buyer. Make sure you contact Lindsay at BroadwellHomes.com. She'll help you with everything from start to close. Licensed realtor at Real Broker LLC. Start your search today at BroadwellHomes.com. Austin said Lalonde isn't the only problem with the lack of effort on PK. So I've been banging that drum since the start of the year. Lack of development. I don't know how much of that is on him. I got to be honest. And not getting the most out of the vets and playing a 1-2-2 and holding on for dear life when they get a lead, coupled with his comment last March. We weren't even supposed to be here. I was leading the fire Lalonde charge. Hopefully they can turn it around. But if not, they definitely need to be sellers at the deadline. He had to go. He had to go. We know that. Like nobody... Like, to me, I'll say it again. The second Montreal game and the St. Louis game, that was when, okay, it's over. And he knew it was over. Yeah. But at the end of the day, this is a situation where I'm going to say it again. I think if people think that the Red Wings are going to take off on some crazy run right now and everything's going to get back on track, I think you're kidding yourself. I do. There are a lot more issues with this franchise right now than just Coach Lalonde. I just do.
And the problem with that is Yzerman's not going to fire himself. You can't walk into that locker room and make the contracts go away. You can't just take players and play GM for a day and trade them for whatever, Sean. You got to fire the coach. It's what happens. Whether he's the problem or not, I don't think he was the problem. You're saying the same thing. That's not the only problem that's on there. But when you look like this, I mean, right now, can we say, is it fair to say, Sean, that Buffalo is the laughingstock of the NHL again?
Yes.
Okay. And then let's say Ottawa. So we've talked about Buffalo, Detroit, Montreal, and Ottawa for a long time now, Sean. Let's say Ottawa is the surprise, the team that looks like they're putting some things together. They're right now, if the season ended, they would be in the playoffs. We're closer to Buffalo, aren't we? I mean, we're close to being the laughing stock of the NHL. And I don't care who you are or who wants to come on here. There's not one person that would have said 5 years into Yzerman that the Detroit Red Wings would be the laughing stock of the NHL. But Sean, here we are.
Second longest non-playoff streak next to the Buffalo Sabres as well. Happy beginning of World Junior Championship Day at work with Swede Slovakian. Tim said, sorry if you guys covered this. How does it all work when a coach is let go and another coach is hired so quickly? Do they talk to the new coach to see if he's interested first? There's familiarity there. He was an assistant here. He was an assistant in Steve's last season here. Lived here for a few years, and I'm not joking, was like a neighbor, didn't live too far from me. And then when he went to San Jose shortly after they won the cup, obviously there's familiarity with the area, the situation. Clearly these conversations were probably had, Mike, I'm guessing after the Blues game. That's my guess, that these conversations were had, and this was a decision that was made probably the 23rd or 24th. That's and probably all parties knew too. That would be my guess. Just tuned in. Lalone relieved of his duties. Yes, he was. Austin said difference between Yzerman's Tampa and Yzerman's Detroit is they started off with a Hall of Fame player in Stamkos who was better in his prime than Larkin, not using it as scapegoat, but with the current CBA, it definitely feels like if you don't draft a superstar, it's hard to get a superstar. You are 100% right. He had Hedman and Stamkos. Think about that.
Mm-hmm.
That they weren't here. And again, Mike, I know I said it 100 times 5-6 years ago and nobody wanted to listen to it. It's like, that's quite a head start when you have two legends. And I think I can include both of them in that category. Legends.
Yes.
Yeah, Hedman's an absolute stud, and Stammer, what more needs to be said? NHL doesn't care what day it is to fire a coach. I don't know if Detroit has a fan base of patience for 7 years. Will this now show it was Lalone's coaching of the players not developed? You'll get the spark. That's why you make a change. You'll get a spark. There's no doubt about that. If people expect them to go on some kind of tear or something, I think they're probably going to be sadly mistaken. I hope that's not the case, but it wasn't working. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Yeah, if there's anything they're going to go on a tear, the tear that they're going to be on is a better effort tear. I mean, again, with the next 3 games, I don't know how much they can put up against some of those teams, but the effort should be better.
Nick said Lalone bobblehead night is January 10th. Is that real?
Can we get to that game, please?
Oh, Ray, how long before CV starts a fire sale of its veterans? We were talking about that before. I'm going to get back to it in just a second because, Mike, I think this ties into what we were just saying, okay? I like what 40 Gumble said here. When you have an entire generation of a fan base that started watching when the Wings were already a top contender in the mid-90s and never lived through the 80s, it's difficult for some to stay patient. Dude, nail head. I think the last thing people in this town want to hear is the word patience across the board. Because look at all the patience we had to show for the Pistons, all the patience that we had to show for generations with the Lions. We're living through it right now with the Tigers, right? And again, I'm going to say it again. If anybody thought that Christopher Illich was going to open his purse strings, I don't know what to tell you. You had nothing to base it on. So asking a Detroit fan to be patient right now is death. Oh, Slovakia scored already. Yeah. Thank you. Can we get back to what Ray asked? How long before Steve starts a fire sale of its veterans? You go first because you know my thoughts.
Okay, so and also on top of that too, to add on to 40 Gumble, there is let's not forget that not only did they not go through the 70s, the 80s, and all those hard times at the Wings, Sean, a lot of their years in winning were a non-cap era team too, and that makes it real hard on a lot of Red Wing fans to understand. That they just can't play GM and go make some of the magical signings that we used to. I mean, it's going to be coming. Some of these veterans are going to be role players on playoff teams this year, just not the Red Wings, right? I mean, we can't put a date to it, but some of these guys will be going. He has to. And if he doesn't, Sean, this gets into what I have said before. If he doesn't, this is more of a sign that he has misevaluated this roster and the talent on this roster. This is something I've been saying since we started this season. And I'm really worried about that. So I would be asking, I'm going to go on an off rant here on what Ray said is, My question would be, when does he start firing the good old boys club that he has with him in the scouting department and the guys that are paid to evaluate this team's talent and help him bring these guys in? Because this isn't just Steve acting alone. He's got a lot of guys. And at some point, we've got to get rid of the glory years. I know it looks good in this fan base, and Hey Hockey Town loves to see Drapers and these names of all these guys from past cups on the evaluation team, the scouting team. But that's my bigger question, is when do we start getting rid of them and bring someone in that can start really evaluating not only the talent we're going to bring in, but the talent that we have right now? Sorry, that was a little bit off ramp, but that's where I think it's got to go.
No, it's Mike, you're absolutely right. This is now, and I get it, because we're at a place where you guys know as well as I do, you can't do any wrong if you're Steve Yzerman in this town. You just can't. You were very mean to me when I thought Chris would spend on the Tigers. You know what I kept on saying, based on what? Based on what? Wait, we haven't seen him do it. Like, what? If he does it, I'd be the first. Hey, wow, he did it. But it just. But anyway, okay. Long story short. Mike, I agree with you. I think some of the pro scouting, and I'll go back to some of the contracts that we talked about early in the show for people that are just you've got Andrew Kopp at $5.625 million until 27-28. You have another 5-1 for JT Compher until 28-29. You have 7.875 for DeBrincat and 4.75 for Tarasenko for one more year. Well, who's doing the scouting at the NHL level? Who's doing the scouting at the NHL level? Who are the guys that are watching that? And I know, Steve, one of the things I respect about Steve Yzerman, Mike, and I know I've told you this, is from all my years doing junior and some college hockey broadcasts, I would see guys all over the place. I would see Chris Draper and Steve Yzerman everywhere. I can't tell you how many times I saw him at CompuWare, later USA Hockey Arena. Ran up to him when I ran into those guys when I was doing a game at Michigan State, all over the 401. I saw guys out like that. A lot of times you see other team scouts, but it's very rare that you see the general manager himself. And I saw Steve Yzerman a lot when he was general manager of Tampa. So a lot of times he wants to go out and do this stuff. But I couldn't agree with you more. Listen, the buck has to stop at Steve Yzerman. I was having this conversation with a guy that we both know, who he was, everything is Coach Lalonde's fault. Mm-hmm. All we have to do is make a change and everything's going to be okay. And so we went back and forth on it. And I finally said, hey, can I ask you a question? Yeah, what? Who hired Coach Lalonde? Who thought that this guy would be ready to take on a National Hockey League team, a team with a bunch of budding young players, and get the most out of them and get them to progress as opposed to regress? That was our conversation, Mike. That literally, and I'm doing the silence on purpose. It's like, okay, do you understand what? Yep. At some point in time, all right, and I know people don't want to do it. At some point in time, we have to look at the golden child. We have to look at Steve Yzerman. Okay.
Yes. That's all. And here's, I'm going to ask you, a lot more of these things than I do, Sean. You've been doing this for a long time. Is the golden child too big in his britches to bring someone on to help him? Is he too big to ask for help? You see it more with newbies than someone that's been doing this for a while, and Yzerman's been doing this for a while. With newbies, they bring in almost like a mentor in a, let's call it a vice president of operations role, a role in there that can help guide him. Is it time for Steve to ask for help and to bring someone into this organization to help guide it back to the championship years, the playoff years, into a winning organization? Because at this point, Steve took a team that was hanging on for dear life, just trying to make the playoffs, right? Sean, I said it a few minutes ago. We're very close. The only reason we're not the laughing stock of the NHL is Buffalo exists. At what point does he reach out for help? Because the help he's getting from his scouting team or whoever is up there in management with him, it ain't working. And I don't know who it would be, but who could it be? And is he too big in his britches to ask for help, Sean?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's part of I did this at Tampa. Look at the long-term success that I helped bring about, and he deserves a whole crap load of that long-term success, from bringing in people like Julien Brisebois to bringing in the coaches that he brought in. Now, you got to give Steve Yzerman his credit there, but I think you also have to say, in the interest of being fair, my job would be a lot easier if I inherited Steven Stamkos and Victor Hedman.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But sometimes I think these guys spend so much time being the smartest guy in the room around so many people that are yes men and just do as you do. That's where we end up where we're at. This is just one man's opinion. I've never been in that room. I've never seen any of these conversations or any of this scouting. That's where I see us at. A man that's the smartest man in the room with a bunch of yes men, and no one saying no, and no one saying, you know what, we might want to relook at this, and bringing in people that are, maybe they're sitting on a beach somewhere, maybe they're on their couch enjoying retirement, but they had their hands in, not coaching or GMing, but running around championship teams that can say, you're missing something here. You're missing this, and you need to make a hard decision. And these hard decisions don't just fall on firing the coach, Sean. There's some internal stuff that has to happen, and Mr. Yzerman might need to sit down and take advice from a past champion.
You nailed it. I think that was one of the things that I thought made Steve Yzerman special in his tenure during Tampa. He wasn't afraid to make the hard move. And sometimes the hard move isn't very popular with the fan base. Sometimes the hard move is giving up a guy that you thought for sure was going to be a fire plug here. Really, I don't think you can count Anthony Mantha in any way, shape, or form as being a hard move looking back in retrospect. I know a lot of people had hopes and aspirations for him, but that wasn't exactly a hard move, so to speak. I'm talking about giving up a guy that you legitimately think is going to be a cornerstone for future Red Wing success. And we haven't seen that yet. Todd, I know I'm so behind. Can I talk about our friends at the Wealth Advantage Group? If you're ready to take charge of your financial future, look no further than the Wealth Advantage Group, located in historic downtown Northville, owned by those two handsome brothers right there with over 20 years of industry experience. That's Mike Husak. That's Jeff Husak. They understand that your financial goals are as unique as you are, and that's why they offer personalized expert guidance to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning. Now, whether you're saving for retirement, getting ready to sell your company, already in retirement, they can help guide you through every step of your financial journey. They work with clients throughout all stages of life and have clients in over 20 different states. The investment world is a complex one, so if you're ready to start taking your finances more seriously, it's time to work with the experts. Reach out to the Wealth Advantage Group at 248-773-8574 or check out their website at www.thewealthadv.com. It was funny, Mike, somebody said on Twitter, this aged awesome. Lalone gone within 20 minutes of posting Ultimate Broadcaster's Curse. And I said, no, he had to go. The last 2.5 games were atrocious, but the question was, and still valid, how much of this is on Coach Lalonde? And I think that's still, and I think we're going to find that answer out the next couple. Now, don't be surprised. You're going to see them engage. You're going to see them, with a spark. That's what always happens after a firing. But are you going to see a team take a giant step up? I'll put it to you this way. My jaw would drop. How's that? I just don't think they have the horses to do something like that, Mike.
No, they don't. And getting on to like how much of a spark is it going to be? I think these next 3 games are going to be very telling to what that locker room looked like towards the end. Where they're going to get this team that I was possibly thinking when we started the show that might be rallying around their coach in Lalone, or were they done with them? If they were done with them, Sean, I'm looking at opening up some of these betting apps and taking a couple bets on the Red Wings in the next couple of games, because if they were done with them, a new voice coming in, you're going to see that effort, that what do I always call them, feisty, that team that is going to be in games. So it's going to be, these next 3 games are very interesting. I said we've got Toronto, Pittsburgh, and I forget who the third one was coming up. But that's, again, this is going to be towards the top end of the NHL they're playing.
Yeah. Now we'll wait and see. A couple comments. I thought Shep brought up a really good point with you a few weeks ago when he said Brad Holmes brings in right guys that fit the identity. Yzerman has just brought in guys. The team has no identity. Hopefully McClellan can attempt to mold one. I kind of get what he was getting at, and it didn't work. And he had to overpay for some of those pieces, see Comfort, see Cop, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes it's harder to run a team where you are the savior of the franchise, see Neely, Drury, et cetera. Rob said, I'm not saying I agree, but Yzerman can be seen as closer to Ken Holland in the same manner as Julien Brisebois is to Jim Nill. Interesting. That's an interesting point. Steve has brought in guys who are past their prime, or guys who other teams didn't want or didn't sign with good teams for a reason. They did the old Tigers model of overpaying for guys, and it's not working. I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, I mean,
nobody wants to hear it, but I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, it's a very fair assessment. And at some point, the clock has to start ticking, and I think it's going to start crumbling in on Steve Yzerman. This is he got loaned out of there. He's bringing in another one of his guys. It'll be very interesting to see what takes place in these next few months, getting closer to the trade deadline, and then as the season ends and the playoff starts, what we see moving forward with this team.
By the way, from a mutual friend of ours who played for him down in Houston in the old IHL, I loved him. Great hire. I'll let you figure out who it was. When you look back, he had such a great year with San Jose his first year. People forget that 117 points, 113 points. Then they had that absolute, do you remember they had that absolute collapse in 2014 where they were up 3-0 on the Kings? Remember that? And then lost. And then he kind of let it fall apart. In Edmonton, he had 70 points, 103, 78, 19 points in 20 games, and he was fired. And then with the Kings, Mike, 64, 49, had 99 points in 22, 104 in 23, and then fired in 24. Not a whole heck of a lot of playoff success. Lost in the conference finals a couple times with San Jose. Not a lot of playoff success his last couple times around. Didn't win a playoff round in LA. Won one playoff round in Edmonton. So there you go.
Well, bringing him in again, the coach wasn't the reason on his way out. The coach isn't going to be the reason that this team succeeds in the future unless Yzerman does his job. And I'm sorry to keep bringing it back to that, but if we think McClellan is going to be the answer and the roster is not going to change and these guys are not going to develop, we're in trouble for a longer period than 7 years, Sean.
Hey, did you know that thousands of Metro Detroiters have already called Legacy Partners to get help with their home and auto insurance? Our friends at Legacy Partners are one of Southeast Michigan's top independent insurance agents. They provide a full-service, one-stop solution for all of your insurance needs, personal and business, large and small. Legacy has helped our listeners and my family, by the way, by fixing mistakes other agents have made, asking the right questions to get the right coverage put in place to properly protect you. And help save you some money at the same time. Chances are, if you haven't checked your policies in the last year, you're paying too much and you could be underinsured. So what are you waiting for? Give Legacy Partners a chance to help with your home, your cars, life insurance, Medicare enrollment, or your business insurance needs. Call them today, 586-209-4106, or visit legacypartnersins.com to get started with your new quotes. Gosh, Mike, isn't that funny? Like in real time, we were talking about it. I don't know how this can continue. The past 2.5 games were brutal, and then they fired him. Imagine that. Imagine
Yeah,
that.
that was right where we said we wanted to start the show. And the text that you sent me after I said, how do we want to do this? And you just said, dead coach walking.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what it was. Did we think it was going to happen while we were doing the show? No. You pegged tomorrow or Saturday after tomorrow's game, right? And my thought was going to be, if we actually had that conversation, which we never got to, was I think this continues because at some point someone's got to say this isn't the problem. And if this is the guy, this is the guy. And I thought we were right where we were last year, and it was going to continue at least for the rest of the year, not do any damage. Maybe they'd bring Bogner and whatever. But shocking to say the least, and you were right.
No, dude, listen. No, Mike, listen. Dude, no inside information or anything like that. I swear to God, nothing. That was just, you got to read the tea leaves sometime. I'm going to say again, you've heard me say this. If somebody tells you they know what Steve Yzerman's going to do, they're lying.
Yeah.
Steve Yzerman doesn't let on information. I'm telling you right now, he doesn't. So I don't think it took a rocket scientist to figure out that this was coming, though. I mean, I can't stress enough. Boy, that 2.5 game stretch was awful. It really, that was like, Mike, unwatchable shit. Like I, now I'm not going to lie. I enjoyed the game Saturday night in Montreal. I did, but to follow that up, that crap show, which it was, that was a crap show in Montreal. To follow that up with that Blues game was gross. Like that done, dead man walking. You're not coming back from that, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, that was, I said, as those games were going on, my phone was blowing up, a couple of threads that me and you are in together about that effort and how ugly it looked. And then I couldn't get to a holiday gathering, and that wasn't the topic of conversation. It was that bad. It had turned, and we kind of sensed this in the last couple of shows. We were saying the fan base is starting to turn. It's not cute anymore. It's not feisty anymore. It is downright ugly. And again, I don't think we're that far ahead of Buffalo right now.
Pretty frightening. I mean, that's pretty frightening. Let me get some more comments before we get out of here. Yeah. But hold on just a second. How about 70% of Yzerman's moves made sense and have worked out? The moves that haven't worked seemed apparent to the public at the time, yet Yzerman has both infinite runway, both with the public and the organization. The best thing for him is to bring in someone who has the ability to tell him no from time to time. Rob, I love that you said that, because do you know when I noticed it most was this past summer? I noticed it. Mike, I remember you have no reason to remember this. I was in LA when all this stuff was going on, and we were all following along with July 1 and everything. And we were in a group text message, and we were going, what is Yzerman doing? What am I missing here? What is there some kind of a goal? As some of the things start, this was, and I have no other way to say this was a miserable offseason for Steve Yzerman. Miserable. I have no other word to use to describe it. Mike, miserable offseason. Yeah. From the trade, and I get trying to create space. And if we want to say, well, he was trying to make another move that didn't pan out, okay, that's fine. But we also have to include miserable. This was a miserable offseason where the Red Wings were going to take a step back this year as opposed to a step up. It just was. And I think a lot of people saw that, Rob. I'm glad that you brought that up. I think this was the one time where not everybody, but a lot of people saw it and said, what is going on? Like that was kind of my feeling, Mike, going back to July 1.
Yeah, that was probably the topic of all those threads were the people are starting to turn on Yzerman. This was the first time they really started to question him, starting with that Wallman trade. That's actually a contract we'd probably love to have right now, right? But if we remember, that Wallman trade was Trouba was coming. Mm-hmm. The Trouba train was coming, right? And again, getting back to something you have said, something that you have said probably every show is, if you think you know what Steve Yzerman's doing, you're wrong, because he doesn't let that out. So the fact that Trouba was tied right to that told you that wasn't good. Just like going through the pages now, everyone, the big rumors are Kreider's coming. which would be a disaster. But that is the big thing. That's
at this point.
It would get rid of, according to the rumors, would get rid of one of those bad contracts we've been talking about. But at what cost to bring a more expensive, worse contract in to a guy that's not going to fit on this team?
Right.
I mean, it's just the wrong timing for all this. But yeah, the summer started it, Sean. But people are starting to sour on the plan. And again, if we want to look at it and compliment and say we're on the right path, that path is 7 years away. And who's ready? Who's ready for that wait?
Unbelievable. Let me try to get a few more in. Boy, Mike, we got to get going. I just turned 51 a few days ago. It's going to suck big time being close to 60 before this team is there. Maybe last time I was in my 20s and 30s. Tom said more useless D-man. Ray said Trouba's wife didn't want to leave New York for Detroit because of school. Should have been a sign of how players feel about Detroit. Can I ask you this? Can I say this, though, in fairness? And I heard that stuff. Do you think we dodged a bullet by Trouba not coming here? And I'm not being funny. I'm not. Mike, seriously, help me out. I'm not being funny. I'm not being funny.
Where would we be? Like again, it's like, where would we be? Those are guys that you would, if you were to make that, when you're on a run and you're ready and you need that piece, what would he be doing on this team that would be adding anything more than what we have? You are absolutely correct. That was a bullet dodged.
I think that he would also probably have more frustration, and you might see him have some more of those Trouba moments.
Oh yeah, which everyone would be entertained. Hey, look at this! He knocked him out,
and he's suspended again. And oh my gosh,
yeah.
Isn't that unbelievable? All right, hey, All About Catering LLC, full service caterer, graduations, weddings, bridal showers, corporate events, anything you need catering for, from 25 to 4,000 people. All About Catering can and will take care of you. Rick and his gang, you got something going on New Year's Eve, give them a call. Customer service and satisfaction is their number one goal. So do not sweat your next big event. Just go to allaboutcateringllc.com today to see their menus and all their 5-star reviews. Give them a call, 586-731-1398 to get your event started. Mike, we've gone way overboard. It's not every day that you start to do something talking about the coming wake of a head coach, and then the head coach says, I'm going to give you the wake right now. But with that being said, before we get out of here, and we'll catch up again next week. I'm going to be gone the next week. Happy New Year to everybody. Happy New Year to you, pal. What are your thoughts on the World Juniors?
That I'm really hoping we can have it all work out and get a Canada-U.S. final, which is what everyone would see. And let's also in the semifinals get a U.S. Sweden rematch of last year's finals in the semifinals. But I'm excited. I want to watch in this tournament, Sean. We've got the future number one pick of the next 2 drafts, playing. And this is why we watch this, to watch these young kids who are one day we're going to be talking about on What the Puck because they're in the NHL. Watching them play in international play. I love it. And I can't wait. I do think it's top heavy, US, Canada, Finland, Sweden.
Yep.
But it'll be for exciting hockey, and I can't wait to get upstairs and watch.
I think the potential of Trey Augustine taking on what is still a loaded Canada team in Canada is unbelievable. The fact that we get it New Year's Eve and presumably, again, those two in essence playing for gold would be epic. There's no doubt about that. Ray said, does Steve need his Shanahan or Chelios type trade that turned the Wings around in the 1990s? Here's what I would say. Are you willing to give up something to get something in return? Because which part of this young nucleus are you willing to give up? Because what, a lot of people aren't going to want DeBrincat at the number that he's at. Nobody's going to want Kane at the number that he's at. Cop, which young, still blooming player do you want to give up to kind of kick that into overdrive, Mike? And I just don't think that's going to happen. I just don't.
And I don't think it's the roster has to be constructed before we're talking about bringing anyone Shanahan, Chelios name wise in, because they're gonna do nothing on this roster. I mean, I think it's a proven point. We're watching guys come in that we thought were going to do something, and there's just not enough there, especially on the top end. We're just too loaded with bottom 6 guys.
All right, buddy. God bless you. We'll talk to you soon. Maybe what did we decide we were going to do? All of a sudden lately, your memory's been better than mine. So are we going to try to do this again January 1st? Do you want to do it January 1st? Next Wednesday? Or are we going to do next Thursday, January 2nd?
I
think we talked about the first, didn't we, Todd? Wednesday the 1st? Is that when we're going to do it? Whatever. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
God bless you. Let me know. Keep both those ideas in mind because I'm coming back early on January 1st, so we can do it either January 1st or January 2nd. God bless you guys. We'll see y'all soon. Bye-bye. Thanks for tapping in. Bye. Bye. God bless you.
What the Puck with Sean Baligian. Executive produced by Sean Baligian and Todd Losey. Theme song, incidental music, and related sound effects are from Always Pushing Forward by Elliot Middleton. Engineering, mixing, and graphic design support provided by the Unsyndicated Podcast team. Don't forget to like and subscribe on all your favorite channels. While you're there, be sure to rate and review the podcast. Got something to say to Sean? Call the Unsyndicated hotline at 248-237-3257.